And we're live.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Inside Movies Galore. I am, or shall I say, Delusions of Grandeur, since this is now probably going to go on that channel. I am one of your hosts, but tonight we are returning to one of Jake's picks that we didn't have time to go on about last week, but we have plenty of time to go on about it this week. So, Jake, why don't you let us know what movie we have in store for the audience tonight, and what is this month all about for you?
All right, thank you. We've got we're continuing our filmmaker February, and just a quick note for the 8 of you out there who actually pay attention to our schedule, and the 2 that care. I do apologize that our schedule had to change last minute because last week we decided to do the right thing first, and that ate up the whole week. So, anyway, we this week will be tackling a film by the other esteemed Lee of cinema, Ang Lee, and his 1999 underseen and almost forgotten Civil War era Midwestern Ride with the Devil. We have a brief description on IMDb. During the American Civil War, 2 friends joined the Bushwhackers, a militant group loyal to the Confederacy. And yeah, that gives you a pretty good setup, but that is only a small piece of the picture. So let's go ahead and launch right into it with our first impressions. And I'll just go to the left of me here on the screen. Forrest, is this your first time with this movie, and what are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is my first time seeing this movie. I had known of this movie, and but I kind of forgot it. I remember seeing trailers for it around the time it came out, but I completely forgot it existed until now. And I was kind of surprised because I remember seeing trailers for it when it came out, and I was surprised to find out it only played in 6 theaters when it first came out. But anyway, so Ang Lee, Ang Lee, honestly, the only other movies of his that I've seen are Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and Hulk. So this is probably my third Ang Lee movie that I've seen. I think it's really well. I think it's pretty well. It's very well made. Great an excellent cast. Toby Mcguire, Skeet Ulrich. I think this was Jules' first acting role. Yep, and she wasn't too bad. Actually, I do see you that you have her as your avatar tonight. But she was really
greatest moment in this film.
She was actually pretty good. Yeah. I'm not gonna lie. Even at 11 years old, I thought seeing the trailers and thinking Jewel was pretty cute. Yeah.
Go ahead.
But yeah, no, I think it was a pretty interesting take on the Civil War. You know, seeing this from the viewpoint of Confederates. But other than that, I don't know. It did leave me kind of cold. It did kind of leave me cold at times. Maybe. I feel like this is another one of those movies where I would have to watch it a few more times to really let it sink in.
All right.
Again, I do think the storytelling, as far as the vantage point, plus the technical aspects of it, are really well done.
All right. That do it for you there? Or?
For now, I think.
Oh, okay, good deal. All right, how about you, Kroll? What are your thoughts on this one? Is this your first time seeing this?
Yes. And last. When you said this was less seen, as I was saying cheers to myself and a little bit under my breath. I just didn't like it at all. I mean, I'm not into Civil War movies. It definitely felt like a Civil War movie. So I do agree the setting was good because it definitely felt like it was a Civil War movie. You know, it definitely felt like one of those. I enjoyed North and South, but that was just kind of a different story within the Civil War, you know. That was a good story, I think. But this, I just did not like. Toby Mcguire he just completely fell out of place. Like it just, I think they would have been much better with a different actor. I like Toby, but he's Spider-Man.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. Like, I mean, yeah, this movie came out before he was Spider-Man, but I don't know. He still felt very, like, maybe more. He felt more boyish in this movie than he did in Spider-Man. But
totally, and when he was like, you know, saying the N-word, which I'm not going to repeat, but, you know, when he was saying that, I was just like, wow, it just seems like a little kid saying it. It just felt so wrong. I mean, it's wrong to say anyways, but it felt really wrong.
And it's pretty jarring when after you've seen him playing a character, such a
beloved character, yeah. Yeah, it really was. And so immediately I just didn't even like his character. And I like to root for a character when I watch a movie. And I felt like there was no one to root for, no one really to like. I mean, I kind of like the black guy a little bit, but then you think about it, he's fighting on the wrong side, you know. So he's kind of messed up too, you know. It's just so there wasn't really, and yeah, Jewel was in it. She's great. Yeah, she was good looking, but you know, she was another one of those, you know, people that you know love slaves and you know thought differently of them, and I just think that thinking is completely wrong. So again, I couldn't even like her character. So there was just no one really for me to like or try to root for or anything. And you know when Toby got shot and he's like got my pinky finger or whatever it was, I was kind of like, well, that's you ever being on the wrong side, you know. But anyways, it was just. Yeah, I didn't really enjoy it, but not my cup of tea. And you know, I think the Civil War was the worst war we've had because everyone died that was American. So, and so that's just my thoughts on it.
All right. How about you, Mo? Is this your first time with the movie, and what are your thoughts?
It was. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Watched it twice. It's got some good action in there, decent cast, you know, it was well done. I kind of like movies like this sometimes where you get to, I guess, see it from the point of view of the bad guys or whatever, you know, not really as relatable. So I can understand why people would, you know, that like to have someone to root for in a movie might not be hyped on it, but it was interesting, man. I thought Jewel did a really good job. Definitely agree on the Toby Mcguire thing. Maybe somebody like Jake Gyllenhaal or whatever would have been better or more believable, I guess.
Only thing is Gyllenhaal was even more unknown back then, so I don't know if they casted him.
Probably not.
They both kind of came out around the same time. This I think was the same year October Sky came out, so it's about.
It definitely, that was a good movie. Remember watching that in school. I don't know. Could have used some more wire foo, some swordplay might have been nice.
More battle scenes.
Hell yeah. Never going to turn those down. So I don't know. I liked it. I mean, I wouldn't say that I loved it, but it was action packed enough that I, you know, like I said, I watched it twice. So
Lynn's blowing up might have been fun.
Good deal. All right. So did that wrap it up for you, Mo? Or?
Yeah, that's, I mean, it's, you know, okay. That's about it.
Oh, we're moving along a good clip with the. Okay, that's cool. How about you, Dave? How about is this your first time with this movie, and what are your initial thoughts?
This was my first time with this movie, and first of all, I want to say that I'm a firm believer in remembering your country's history. When you go into these types of films, because history is something that people like to cancel, like to forget, like to throw under the rug. And I think that's why we get films like this. It is because it shows us a moment in time where, you know, things weren't quite right with our country. And at first, I was like, wait a minute. Toby Mcguire, isn't he like kind of a guy who kind of like, even the older he gets, like sounds like he hasn't hit puberty? He just always sounds like a little kid whenever I hear him speak. So it's kind of hard for me to invest myself whenever he's doing a serious role. So when they threw the wig on him and made him have longer hair, it was like they were giving him him who's like this not really that great looking young kid a rougher look, when even that rougher look doesn't really look that great on him. I don't know. I have different thoughts about Jewel. Yeah, she's very pretty, and yet I had a teacher who I respected that was in my college who in real life actually like walked into a recording studio and just basically at least took one look at him and his weight and was like, oh, I gotta put up with this. So when I heard that about Jewel, and I know that other people love Jewel and stuff like that, that made me like have more of a bad what is it, idea about Jewel.
Bad taste in your mouth.
Yeah, bad taste in my mouth. Knowing that she was a little cruel to someone that I like and respect. So and maybe that happened like earlier on in her career. I don't know. All I know is it happened, and
even worse.
So to me, seeing her, yeah, she's pretty. And the thing about this movie, you got to remember, it's not the Confederates. It's not technically the Confederacy that we're seeing. We're seeing a privateer group that's working outside of the bounds of the Confederacy.
Yeah.
Doing their own shit.
Confederate sympathizers, basically.
Correct. So it's not quite the South, and it's not quite the North, but it's an interesting look on the brutality of the situation. And I think that it was shot well. The music was pretty good. It was very slow, which is why at one point I looked at I looked at the time. I was like, oh shit, I've got 2 more hours on this film. I was like, thank you, Jacob.
I think I did that a couple times.
You're welcome.
But I enjoyed the scenery. I love. I don't know what it is, but I love movies about the Civil War. Especially if they show how graphic it really is, and it did show some of the graphicness that it can be in a battle. That can, and they didn't shy away from it. One thing I do want to say really quick before we go on to anybody else is there was a moment where I actually give Toby Mcguire some chops. Is the fact that he showed he was that kind of person who could actually go and like cut his friend's arm off. Like, yeah, with no problem, like whatsoever.
Yeah.
Other than that, kudos. But it's not a film that I love per se, but I did like it.
Good deal.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the type of thing I'd probably watch again if it came on TV or something.
All right. How about you, Brandon?
I had kind of loosely heard the name of this film. I mean, I know Ang Lee well enough to have seen a number of those movies. Now, this was not very much like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which
Lies.
I was missing all of that combat, like the string jumping combat that they had that movie.
And it definitely wasn't as dark as the Hulk.
Yeah, it should have been like a combination of those two.
Might have been good.
But I mean, I don't give Toby Mcguire all that much flack for it. I think that he did an excellent job in the movie. He came across as a fairly good protagonist overall. I mean, I grew up in the middle of the South. The whole idea that it's the Northerners who are all evil, and that the Confederates were just trying to fight for free economics and all that stuff, and we'd hear that all the time growing up. I don't necessarily believe that, but I understand where people would come up on that side. I mean, they're fighting for their land and their people at the time. They weren't all fighting for slavery. But I enjoyed the movie for the most part. It was okay. I don't know if I need to watch it again anytime soon, but it was worth at least one watch, I think.
Oh, very good. And the well, I guess I'll go ahead and do mine. I have a feeling I scared some people away with my last couple weeks selections. But and I do know our two movies tonight are the only ones Dane said he had not seen out of this 6. So too bad he couldn't join us. But anyway, for me, this was one that came out actually at almost the perfect time for me. When I was putting my group of movies together for this month, I very pointedly wanted to have a film that came out in 1999 because that was really the year that I basically started down this road of being a hardcore film geek. I had kind of started getting into movies more in the late 90s, but I went to college and fell in with a group of hardcore film geeks. And so 99, 2000, that was really the start of it all. And at that time, I was really getting into reading like the previews and Entertainment Weekly, like the upcoming movies and whatever. And I saw Ang Lee. Okay, that name sounds familiar. Toby Mcguire. Oh, yeah, he's kind of cool. Jewel. What? Because I was already a big fan of Jewel from I loved her music from the get-go. I was like, holy crap, Jewel's in the movie?
So that was what I thought for the first time I saw a preview for this.
Yeah. And when I read about it, I'm like, Civil War drama. And I'm like, well, I'm not a big war movie person, but I'll. But then the movie just sank without a trace. Forrest alluded to this. This movie opened in 6 theaters and was only in theaters for about 6 weeks. And it made about $635,096 in ticket sales. And that was it. It was gone. And no one really paid attention to it come awards season. Nothing. So it basically sank and I moved on to other things. And then it was probably the next couple of years later when Crouching Tiger came out and I saw that and I was, okay, I want to see this dude's movies. And I still have not tracked down his first film, Pushing Hands. It is out of print and hard to find. But I have seen all of Ang Lee's other films and I love them. Crouching Tiger is one of my very favorite films. I was one of the 20 people that loved Hulk. I love all of his movies, and part of it is he has a very meditative quality to the films that some people will call slow, but I like that. I also like his attention to detail and the fact that he likes to swing for the fences, both in terms of his actors and technology. He has worked with a truly international group of individuals over the years. including some late greats, Alan Rickman, Irfan Khan, and a couple others who are sadly no longer with us. But when I finally got around to this one, it was probably my third or fourth Ang Lee film that I got to. And I was just enthralled. I was like, this is stuff I never learned in school. Dave made a good point. Nobody talks about what happened on the Western Front during the Civil War. Almost all of it is the Union troops versus the Army of Virginia, basically. And sometimes you'll hear about the Army of Tennessee and that front and everything, especially Sherman's. They're retreating from Sherman as he did his path of destruction and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, the only time they ever did that was when they did some like 90s shit with like the Buffalo Girls and Buffalo
Right.
the Soldiers, But other than that, they didn't really touch a lot on the Confederate side of things, or
Right.
what. So,
and that's the other thing. It's the other thing. We have a couple of very, very, very notable and important films that have not aged so well that were on the side of the Confederacy. I'm thinking, of course, of Gone with the Wind and Birth of a Nation. But other than those, you don't get very many that really tried to go on the side of the South. But those two films were cheerleading the cause of the Confederacy.
This is much more nuanced.
This one's a lot more nuanced.
I do need to say Gone with the Wind was my mother's favorite movie. Just had to say that.
And I will say, in many ways, one day we will need to cover Gone with the Wind, and that will be an interesting discussion. And my first impression with that
I only want to cover it because it was my mother's favorite. I personally can't find.
But this one is sneaky. It makes you think you're watching a movie told from the point of view of the Confederacy. But really, you're watching the movie from the point of the view of a recent German immigrant who was raised with Southerners and is a Confederate sympathizer, but he is an outsider. And by the end of the film, you realize that one of the main characters that you didn't realize was a main character is that freed black slave that was mentioned earlier, who fights for the Confederacy, yes, but not because he wants to. And I think it's definitely dismissive to say that he was on the wrong side. The film is pretty much about the journey of the two of them from ambiguity into a place where they can hold their head up and know what they're doing, basically. So it's a very sneaky film narratively, and I like that a lot. I did enjoy seeing Jewel. I did enjoy that very much. And I enjoyed a lot. This was also
I'm sure you wanted to be Toby Mcguire when she was.
Oh my God, yes. We're going to talk about that. There's one moment in the film. It's the only time that even more so than when he was Spider-Man and getting his powers, there was one moment in this film where I would have loved to have been in Toby's shoes. But we'll get to that. But this was my introduction to Jonathan Rhys Meyers, actually, and he is an interesting character in the film. And there's a lot of good stuff going on, and
definitely pre-Dracula season.
So, or pre-Tudors even, or some of those things. But so I've seen the film now. Oh, and as other side note, I took a Civil War class mainly because it was famous for the field trip. I won't lie. I had to go on that field trip, and I don't regret it. It was awesome. But I remember talking to my professor about this film, and I was talking about, I saw this movie about the Western Front. I told him, he's like, oh, yeah, I've heard of that. And he's like, yeah, you're right. No one ever really. And even in the Civil War class, we barely touched on the events of this film. Like even the Lawrence massacre. Corolla, you singled out the war as one of the worst moments in American history. You could single out the Lawrence Massacre as one of the worst moments in American history. And this film recreates it pretty well. So that's an interesting element as well.
I would say.
What's that?
I said
What's that?
The war, in my opinion. So.
Yeah. So at any rate, that's kind of my long and circuitous. I did see this again for this, obviously, and my version had 2 commentary tracks, one with Ang Lee and James Seamus, and one with the cinematographer, production designer, and sound editor of the film. So I essentially watched the film 3 times to get ready for this, and it's good times. I'm glad I got to revisit it. I am a little disappointed I didn't get to pair the 2 Lees, but I came to realize there's actually a lot of similarities between this one and Mirai that so I don't mind them getting paired up after all.
Both don't.
But agree to disagree. So at any rate, I'm going to give a contrary to the last 2 weeks, I'm going to do a somewhat more plot synopsis this time around. The film starts with a young man riding through the forest on his way to a big celebration. It turns out it's a wedding. This is Toby Mcguire in his role as Jake Rodell, aka Dutchie, because again, he's the child of a German immigrant. And this was another reason I wanted to do this film, because a lot of times people, it seems like there's always an immigrant group that this country gets whipped up in a frothy, angry fervor about. We don't want them here, and it just I'm over that.
Well,
what's up?
I was going to say, even at this time, immigrants were not really thought of as like natives in the United States of A.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That has been our MO from the get-go. And we've never been kindly to other groups, period. And this particular period, the Germans happened to be probably the most recent arrivals on our shores. And yeah, they were kind of accepted with skepticism, sometimes downright hostility, but generally they were not welcomed with open arms. Let's put it that way. And that particularly hits home because I am partly of German descent, partly probably descended from that first wave of migrants in some ways. So, I thought that was an interesting wrinkle to the film, if you will. The other thing, so he's going to this wedding for his best friend, Jack Bull Childs, which that's a Southern name. And he's played by Skeet Ulrich, and his sister, I think it is getting married.
Yeah,
and they have this big event. And there's a scene that was actually cut from the original theatrical release, but luckily was added back in for the Criterion release, which features Asa Childs, his father, speaking with another Southern sympathizer and a Union sympathizer, who that is also our introduction to Alf Bowden, who I saw that and I was like, oh, holy crap, I forgot Mark Ruffalo was in this.
Yeah.
Talk about someone at the start of their career. He has a very small role as
his character was a prick, though.
What's that?
His character was a prick.
His character was a prick, and we'll find out how much. But so what's that?
I would say I've kind of found myself like watching movies from the '90s that I didn't see when they came out. and finding Mark Ruffalo popping up in the strangest places.
Oh,
Between this movie and The Dentist.
The Dentist.
I've seen The Dentist.
I do believe it. I think it was just after this. I think the first film that people were really raving about him was a movie called You Can Count on Me that came out the year after this. But yeah, you're right. He was in a bunch of stuff in the 90s. I saw 54. That was an interesting movie. So yeah, at any rate, he is of course a very gifted actor, and so that was kind of a fun little bonus there. So we cut tonight where we also are introduced to Jake's father, and you find out that he is not having it. He doesn't care to associate with that particular crowd. He just keeps to himself and works. And but then you cut to that night where Jake hears a noise and in the direction of the child's place. He goes over there pretty much just in time to see as a child's killed execution style. And Jack Bull comes at him, and they run away, and cut to a year later where they are now part of the Bushwhackers, a group of Confederate sympathizing guerrillas, basically, in the woods and hills and valleys of western central Missouri, going up against the Jayhawkers, which were sort of the northern equivalent. They were a little more organized, I think a little better funded, but they were making incursions onto Bushwhacker land, which gave the Southerners their advantage, if you will, because that's another thing that people think like north south, like it wasn't really clear cut. Missouri was not clearly a Confederate state or a Northern state. It was kept in the Union. But it was like, I guess you could say in modern parlance, you could call it a purple state. Like it wasn't a red or a blue. It was purple.
It's unfortunate because even if you were a state that was not part of the war, you were caught up in it regardless.
Yes. Or a territory for that matter, because at this point, Kansas and Nebraska were still territories. And that was a big part of why people in that area were so up in arms. There was all kinds of stuff about trying to bring those two in as slave versus free states. And so it was a rough time. Let's put it that way. So we're introduced to the Bushwhackers. We see a group ride into a trading post, a little group of 4 wearing Union uniforms, except for the person slung over a horse who turns out to be Jake, faking it. And you realize pretty quickly Jack Bull's one of the others. But here's where we meet John Rhys Meyers playing a character named Pitt Mackson. And we also meet Black John, who's played by Jim Caviezel. And I'm curious, like, what are y'all's thoughts on these two as characters?
Well, Pitt is like the character that our duchy seems to admire a lot. He looks up to him, and he's the friend that ultimately he has to eventually take his arm off.
I think you're talking about Jack Bull.
Okay.
Well, actually, okay, let's back up. We didn't really talk about Jack Bull. What are y'all's thoughts on him? Okay. Dave.
Well, Jack Bull is Jack Bull is an interesting character because he seems to be like the leader of this small group of bushwhackers until you actually realize that there are people in charge of him. So and Jim Gavazrel is one of those characters that they end up it's Jim Gavazrel and Simon Baker who play those two characters.
Which one? Which two?
Jim Gavazrel is the character who is in charge.
He is Black John. Jim Cavazzo is Black John. We have met him at this point, but we have not met Simon Baker as George Clodd. We haven't gotten to him yet.
No.
Yeah. But yeah, so, and we didn't really talk about Dutchie as a character either. And there was a lot of talk about Toby Mcguire. I'm just going to go ahead and throw it out there. I do think Toby has kind of a doofy look. It's like, it's really hard for him to shake that. I'm sorry. It's the way he looks.
Yeah, and he just always looks like he's showing up at your house to collect your like monthly fee for the newspaper.
Either that, or he's just part of the next group of Jehovah's Witnesses knocking on your door.
I could believe him as a Jehovah's Witness, yes. And I agree that he seems youthful even now. Although, if you watch No Way Home, he definitely is not quite as childlike as he was when he did the first Spider-Man. That's for sure.
The first three Spider-Man, yeah.
And in fairness, he is playing a teen here, so that it makes sense. I do think overall, like I said, Dutchie's kind of a sneaky character because at first he has been drinking the Kool-Aid his whole life. He believes all the stuff that Jack Bull believes, all the stuff about Southern chivalry and all the stuff about the proper place for the slave and all that kind of stuff, and the proper way to treat other people and or not, or he's learned a lot from Jack Bull. And you're right, Dave, he looks up to him big time. They are like brothers in a way.
He's an immigrant. He's an immigrant where his friend is like almost of like genteel Southern.
He's kind of the closest thing to the gentry in Missouri, basically.
Correct.
Yeah. So it's not like Southern plantation gentry, but it's
No.
It's kind of it's like dime store gentry. They probably wouldn't like that, but but anyway, yeah. Anyone else have any thoughts they want to put out on the two guys we start with? Jake and Jack Bull?
Oh, go ahead, dude.
I was just gonna say, when Toby Mcguire's character first saw black guy with the gun, I can't remember his name. I'm sorry, but him with the gun, he's like, he was just like saying that's scary thing to see, him with a gun, and saying that he's a good guy, and he just saw the prejudice that he grew up with, like you said, that Jack Bull believed, so he believed all that crap too, and he was just like, I guess the one good thing we can say about the film is they ended up becoming friends, and even though I feel they were both on the wrong side, we'll still stand by that. They did become friends, so he did see past his skin, so he was able to learn that just because someone's skin color is different doesn't mean the person is bad or should be a slave or whatever. So he did kind of learn. Maybe not completely changed his mind about all of them, but at least one changed his mind. So so he did learn something at least. And as far as Jack Bull, I like the actor. I recently watched him in Riverdale. So
I need to see that.
He fit the part. He actually definitely did a great role. He was very believable. I wanted to like the character, and I did a little bit. Just like Toby Mcguire's character, because I want to like somebody. That's just the way I am. But I couldn't completely like anyone in this film.
Right. All the main characters are pretty decent for the most part, and they do a good job of showing that outside of their fucked up belief system down here living in the South.
Yeah.
With that removed, they're all pretty
they're decent people
mostly
without that.
Mostly.
Without that. Even Jules' character was, first thing, she saw him and the black guy, and she was like, she was really horrible about it, you know.
Yeah.
And
Jewel being racist definitely was a shock.
Yeah, it really
I mean, it
was.
wasn't a shock because of the context of the movie, but it's like, I don't know.
it was a shock to me because I'm used to her music, and she's
She
like
feels so
nothing
innocent,
wrong.
you know. And
being
then,
that hippie chick next door.
yeah,
Yeah, but then hearing David's story about her, I'm like, wow, that doesn't sound anything like what I would picture Jewel. Like, I used to have dreams of her and shit, and I used to think she was really down to earth, and to hear she said something like that, I'm like, wow, what a fucking bitch.
I mean, I don't know. By all accounts, she's pretty well liked. So I think, I mean, everybody has a bad day or says something rude at some point in their life.
Well,
maybe.
you know, I mean, if it was just a bad day, fine. But if it's something she did on the regular, then I don't think she's as nice as people think. So that's how I feel. I mean, I'm a fat guy, so, you know.
Yeah, that's pretty fucking rude.
It really is.
I wonder about any of that, but I think we've said a few times on this channel, and I think I know we've said a lot in discussion that like you can't necessarily be expected to base your opinions on individual artists based on their personality. You know, they
true. I mean, I still
work definitely speak. Yeah, and you know, again, you know, it's. The commentary that I heard, everyone was talking about like she was green when she started. So Ang Lee expressed a little bit of frustration at the beginning of trying to teach her how to act, and he came to find out she was used to putting her all into an hour or two burst, like as if a concert or a music video. And she wasn't used to pacing herself to work all day.
Makes sense.
And so that was an interesting sort of little bit of info that I was like, that was an interesting bit of insight. A lot of musicians fall on their faces with their first film roles.
Yeah,
and I wonder if that's part of the reason why, you know.
If you get a musician, you know, you can't get mad at them for not acting because they're not actors. She wasn't an actor. It was her first film.
Anyway,
she didn't know how to do it, really. And you know.
She didn't know the amount of work that was going to go into
she didn't realize it was
the type of work,
all day and all night type thing where, you know, she's used to working for a couple hours really hard and strong and, you know, and then chilling the rest of the time or whatever.
Well, like, I think Mo, it sounded like you had a thought a couple minutes back, or
I just think it would have been funny if Jewel delivered all her lines in the movie in that singing voice that she uses. That would have been enjoyable. I don't know, man. I kind of lost my train of thought on that, but yeah, she did fine, I think.
Okay. So, we'll get to that character. She's quite late in the story. Well, not super late, but you know what I mean. A little later in the story. But again, what's up, Brandon?
One could say that the reaction that they get about seeing a person of color with a weapon is not all that far removed from how people react today.
Right.
I agree.
And I'm almost willing to say that sometimes attitudes are not all that different when it comes to that today.
Well, I do agree, whether you're from the North or the South. Or
as we discussed in our last film discussion. But
that's definitely true.
But I still feel like it's good to see those two characters develop and grow as people throughout.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was saying. I mean, that, at least that was a little bit redeemable in the movie. You know, in my eyes.
And again, we haven't actually gotten that to Holt yet either. But the like I said, I was kind of curious. Anyone else want to throw anything out on Jake or Jack Bull before we pivot and continue?
I always it takes me a minute or two watching Skeet Ulrich to stop constantly thinking that he looks just like the dude from Bush. So it's I just hear Bush songs for the first 5 minutes he's on screen.
I see him. I will always associate him with Billy Loomis and Scream.
Yeah,
and it's like
I forgot he was in that.
Yeah, and it's like, and Toby, I think at this point,
Spider-Man.
By the time I saw this, it was before Spider-Man came out, but by the time I saw this, I had definitely seen another movie that came out at the same time, which was The Side of House Rules. And I also had definitely seen Pleasantville. And so
dude,
I
I've been
definitely
sitting here
had
the whole time trying to remember what other movie I really remembered him from, and it's Pleasantville.
Right.
Yeah,
Yep.
same here.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember anything he was
That was
in.
one of my must watches as a kid.
Yeah, I love
Or like
it.
for like
It's
stop
great.
and watch.
I've only seen it like twice, but it was a good movie.
Yeah. So Ulrich definitely plays a much more likable and generally decent. I mean, some prejudices aside, as a person, he could be thought of
And he
as
gets to bang
decent for
Jewel
his
first.
time. But there is still that lingering, like, but when's that shoe going to drop? You know, and then, until of course he dies. But anyway,
He's
so
kind
the
of
next
abusive to Mcguire's character sometimes too.
He is
Like
a little
there's
bit.
that
Well,
awkward
they're
moment where he
friends,
kicks him,
though.
and it really shows like that class difference, I guess.
Well, they are
so that
like
still
brothers
exists between them, you know.
I think they are like brothers, but
Oh,
I
yeah,
think
they
there is, in a sense, that is one of the reasons why they do squabble and fight from time to time. They definitely have that kind of relationship, you know. So it's like, and actually in the commentary, Seamus and Lee were joking that there was even a little bit of a bromance going on there, but they were like, it's not really there, but you know, it's kind of fun to think.
It seems to happen in those Ang Lee cowboy movies.
It
You know what I'm saying?
does.
Yeah. That was a good mixture of,
Yeah, hey, it gets lonely out on the range.
It sure does.
Not quite Brokeback Mountain.
No, not quite Brokeback level with this one.
So we've got some pretty cool ideas here. We got the editing of the Hulk.
Right.
We got the wire combat of
Yeah.
Crouching Tiger and the bromance of Brokeback Mountain.
Yeah.
If we
Dude.
added all those into this movie, it would have made it a very interesting.
And that's like
They
I
sure
said-
would have got the drop on those Yankees if they jumped up and started dancing through the fucking trees, man.
and, that's- and it's like I said, Ang Lee really
Or if
loves.
Mark Ruffalo had hulked up.
Yeah, he could have freed himself, dude.
Yeah, jeez. Yeah, you wouldn't like it when he's angry. Again, well, now that we got those two pretty well, like I said, I do want to put a little bit into Black John and Mackeson, and then you know once you do have that first event. You then do meet George Clyde and Holt, Daniel Holt. And so as a group, this is essentially the main band. We've got a few others. Turner is the dude that gets his jaw kicked out of place. And that gets kind of... And there's a couple other folks who are there kind of for much of the story. But really
the asshole that always calls him Dutchie.
That's Mackeson, Pitt Mackeson, yeah. Okay. So I'm just, like I said, if anyone wants to launch in on any one of them, essentially Black John is essentially the leader, the Jim Caviezel character. Mackeson is the trigger happy. Ang Lee described him as a rock star, and in a sense he kind of is. He's sort of like the rock star of the group, you know, the one that struts around trying to be all that.
Yeah, he's like the Civil War equivalent of like those hot shot like fighter pilot jocks.
Yeah, exactly. Yes,
he thinks his own shit don't stink.
Exactly. Yes, and then you get George Clyde is like we said, you know, the Childs are kind of like Don Store Gentile. George Clyde, I think, is like a legit aristocrat, if I understood correctly. And he has his freedman, this former slave, Daniel Holt, that he had bought his freedom, and now Holt is kind of his valet in a sense. And they're, like I said, it's an interesting group.
I did like him for that, for like, you know, he even though he was on the south side, but he saw him as an equal, as a friend, even though, again, he believes in slavery and shit and everything, but Holt he saw as a friend, and anybody who tried to treat him like a slave, he like bitch slapped. Not literally, but he said something like he wouldn't let anyone talk to him like that. He's like he's not my N word. He's he's just he's basically his friend. I don't think he called him his friend, but you could tell
he's just someone I trust with my life every day, I think is what he said.
Yeah. He said, I put my life in his hands every day, and
right.
the way he said it, like, he meant it. He meant it 100%.
He was also pretty rad because he looked like an ancestor of Colonel Sanders.
Yeah, with that big Basil Rathbone pipe that he carried around all the time.
Yeah, he definitely had the. He definitely, you could tell he was the leader of the little band there, and he was he was in charge, and like I said, he stood up for his friend, even though he was a black guy, and they were all Confederates, and he stood up for him. He wouldn't let anyone talk shit. He wouldn't let anyone, which was very admirable. Again, I think he was on the wrong side, but I think he was the first one to be admirable and not see someone just for their color of the skin. So.
That's the idea, though, is that these weren't like faceless evil people. No matter who was on any side, I mean, they were all human beings with good and bad about them. Some of them much more bad than others.
Oh, I agree.
But yeah, I mean, like I said, most of the people in that group were not bad people.
Yeah, you take away the one prejudice part about them, and they're decent people, But
I wouldn't say they all were.
One thing is just kind of big deal,
Yeah, it definitely is, and it was of different levels of importance to each one. I think the impression I got was that Black John was not really in it so much for questions of slavery as he was probably more of a states' writer. That was kind of the impression I got. He just felt that he and his had been disrespected by the North. And there was that one moment where you learn that like he had family that were killed in that one attack in Kansas. And that was what really lit the fire under him to get them to join Quantrell.
Right, which makes sense.
Right. Clyde was more of again, his way of life was threatened because, and his family was killed, if I remember correctly. So but he kept a good sense of humor about it. And again, he seemed a decent fella. He was relatively amusing. As the movie goes on, you do find out that there was a lot more to his and Holt's relationship than there first appeared. It was more nuanced, and Clyde comes off the worse for it. But
that bromance.
Well, and then of course there's Mackeson, who, let's just face it, he was just a sociopath with a gun. I mean, he was an asshole who liked killing and had an excuse to do it. And that's pretty much, and yes, a somewhat racist, but again, not just against the blacks,
but against the Germans.
Very much against
white in his proper eyes,
Right, exactly. Anyone who wasn't like a good Missourian, he didn't want anything to do with, pretty much. And he kind of becomes Dutchy's nemesis in a sense.
Yeah, he is.
Which is kind of an interesting, an unfortunate thing to happen from someone who's supposed to be on your side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he's a German, so he doesn't see him as being on his side. He sees him as being the other side, the bad side, because he doesn't deserve to be on his side.
So for the most part, other than one part in the movie, I was actually surprised, especially at the end. I thought that he would have made a go for him at the very end, but he did surprise me, and I'm sure we'll get to that later, but I was surprised.
I actually enjoyed that scene. I think Toby Mcguire stood up right up to him like, do what you got to do. I got the shotgun here, and go ahead, come for me, motherfucker. Basically. I mean, he does have that boyish look, but that moment he looked pretty serious. Like, come fuck with me, man.
Yeah.
I don't want to fuck with him with that shotgun.
Right.
So,
You kind of also get the impression that Maxson he kind of has a fatalistic streak to him too. Like he's kind of like, we're all going to die anyway. I might as well take as many of you out with me as I can.
Right.
That's kind of his, he kind of has that sort of wild feel to him. And like I said, that was my first introduction to John Rhys Meyers, and he's good at playing intense characters. Let's put it that way. I thought that was kind of interesting. I have 3 seasons of The Tudor sitting upstairs, but I haven't watched it yet. I need to. Of course, he went to star in Woody Allen's Match Point. Pretty solid performance. Some other stuff there. But so these guys, they come across a cabin out in a field where there's a mother and a daughter, and Celia Weston is the mother. They get brought in for a little bit of hospitality and food. And again, one of those deleted scenes involved her son, who had his leg blown off in actual battle, like he had been an actual Confederate soldier. Well, he definitely had a fatalistic streak at this point.
Yeah.
But that was an interesting few discussions there that culminates in an ambush. Some of these Jayhawkers have tracked them down, and I think that might have been like one of the first major action sequences in the film. There were others before, but this was a big one. So what are y'all's thoughts on that whole ambush and shootout scene there?
Oh, it's great. I love scenes like shootout scenes like that where a tranquil place just evolves into friggin' chaos, Toby Mcguire getting his pinky shot off was funny.
That was the best part. That was really the best part. And he was just like, my pinky! And I was just like, I ain't feel bad for him because, like I said, he's on the wrong side. That's the way I put it.
I love his little speech later to Jack Bull about why it's actually a good thing that he has a nubbin for a finger.
Yeah, that was pretty great.
That was great. But yeah, anyone else have any thoughts on that?
He used it with the baby, didn't he?
Oh well, yeah,
that the baby down later on. That was kind of funny because the baby would stop crying and he was nubbed and he said something about it. That was kind of funny.
Yeah. But I mean, like, as far as first of all, at the start of the ambush, there's the part where, of course, they just start shooting, and Black John stands up and is like, "Everyone, ceasefire, ceasefire, ceasefire!" And then he's like, "We have women here. We need to send." So you get a little taste of that weird. And I still find it kind of odd. I'm sure some people would disagree with me, but it's like that whole antebellum sense of chivalry that they had, or what they called chivalry, where it was like, they would do just about anything to each other, but they would stop a battle cold to get the women and girls out of there. And I'm like, that was kind of cool. I mean, it
is. I mean,
it's
I guess
weird,
in a way
but
you can look at it as sexist, but
it is sexist as hell.
But they're trying. Nowadays women just fight.
Yeah.
So women, they're fighting. They're the enemy, or whatever. But yeah, then at least both sides agreed to cease fire and let the women come out. Now I would think it would be women, children, and elderly included, but it just seems to be just women. Like doesn't matter if you're a child, if you're a boy, or an old man. Like
as Dutchie says later, pups grow up to be dogs. So it's like they kind of
that was horrible. I remember that. I was like, wow, that's just fucked up.
What they should have done was have that old lady get across to their line and then just bust out some wire foo and start whipping their ass with a frying pan. That would have been pretty sweet.
Okay.
So they sent her in like a Trojan horse, like she was actually their secret weapon.
Women. It's women. Please don't go back.
But the
Pack my
and-
men whips back.
I think Brandon and Moog probably both tell me if I'm right on this, but in a sense, it's kind of a good real world example of, I guess you could say, lawful evil, maybe. Like,
Yeah.
You do these horrible things, but you have your rigid code that you stick to. It's kind of, it was interesting to see that in action there and at several other points in the film too. But yeah, but then of course once they are almost out of the way, you notice one of those Jayhawkers didn't even bother to wait for them to get out of the way. He was like, okay, yeah.
Yeah, he was still fucking firing. Just firing. Like I said, there was shitheads on both sides. So.
Right. So you have
just
this
kind of does that, you know.
So you got this thing with you got all the federales Swiss cheesing this little building, and then they make a run for it. And I like that sequence where they're all making a run for it. I think that's obviously they send Holt out first. Which incidentally, we got to mention, Holt is played by Jeffrey Wright, who is a phenomenal actor. And this was one of his early big roles. Of course, they send him out first with George Clyde right behind, and everyone comes out. You know, Toby comes out screaming his head off, trying to be threatening. It's just kind of,
it's actually kind of scary,
crazy.
You know. Like they do a good job in that whole, you know, retreat sequence of making it feel really tense. Like you know how it would actually feel to probably run out while there's a bunch of dudes in the trees like shooting at you and stuff. Because that's something kind of unsung in Civil War movies as far as the settings goes. A lot of these forests, man, it'd be crazy being in there with like some dudes shooting at you with muzzle loaders or something. And
well,
I mean,
there's
some thick wood down there, you know.
And actually, that brings up a good point that I want to mention that they mentioned in the commentaries. The bushwhackers are considered by people who know these things, like who are familiar with equestrian care and horse riding generally and whatever. The bushwhackers have apparently been considered some of the best riders known in history, because they were able to go at top speed through these dense forests. That takes some skill.
Yeah, and they capture that really well in the movie.
They did a really good job. Of
the horses, you know.
And everyone there basically did boot camp to learn how to ride. Actually, they talk in the commentary about how Ang and the cinematographer actually took the boot camp too, to learn how to ride horses, just to get the feel for it. And it really, I think it shows that and apparently Skeet Ulrich apparently has been doing that his whole life. Like he actually is an expert in that field, supposedly. Yeah. But of course, this is the part where Turner gets his face kicked in, and it's just never the same after that. Talk about let's just say he's left with a face for radio, as they say. And so you get obviously some casualties here, but mostly they get off and they go about and do their thing. And before long, I think leaving there, that was when we have our scene with Alf Bowden, wasn't it? I think it was. They came into a camp and a bunch of the Jayhawkers were tied to a post.
That sounds right, yeah.
So, one of them calls out Jake Rodell, and he comes over and he's like, oh, Alf. And they start, kind of shooting the shit. But obviously it's a one-sided conversation because one of them's been beat to a crap and he's tied to a post. But they're having a little bit of a conversation, and then after that, we come to find out that some of the bushwhackers have been captured, and Black John wants to propose a trade. The ones that they have for the prisoners. And
Well, that was Dutchy's idea. That was Dutchy's idea.
Well, Dutchy sees the idea. Dutchy gets the idea of sending one of them to send the message, because he's like, well, it would show that we're serious, that we have prisoners. It would show that we're serious about negotiating. And John likes the idea. He's like, it's like, you should speak up more. You're not near so dumb as you let on. And then, of course, Toby's like, oh, gee, thanks.
Well, he could have said, you're not as dumb as you look, but, at least he didn't go there.
Yeah. But there was okay, you guys were talking about George Clyde as the leader. I think George Clyde might have been sort of their rallying point, but really John is more the leader. But you have him making their demands, but at the end of it, George Clyde puts out add this to the end. Where you think we is, we ain't. Or whatever it was he said, and which was kind of an amusing little thing. And he's satisfied with himself and goes back to smoking his pipe. But, they do, I think, add it. So Jake puts Alf up on a horse. He's like, okay, so you know what to do, whatever. And the whole time, Alf is just staring him down. He made Hulk angry.
that he did.
He did. He made Hulk angry.
I wanted to think Mark Ruffalo's character was a good guy. One, he's from the North, right? So I already think they're the good guys. And Mark Ruffalo is such a likable guy that, and then we hear what he did. I'm like, wow, what a scumbag.
Yeah, we skip ahead a few scenes. You get this one guy who's giving them some updates, and then he just puts his hat down and Jake, that Union man you released here, he drove straight from here and he went and killed your father. And it's like, and when he rides off, Toby does give him a little bit of a look like, I'm
not quite sure about this dude.
Yeah, he knows something's up, but so he tried to show mercy and it backfired big time. But
and
I really like that.
To do with it. I mean, he was like trying to be completely neutral. Like he just lived there. He wanted to do his work and be left alone. Like he didn't want to be part of the war at all, and he was killed for nothing just because he was his father.
I really like that element because more often than not in like war movies, when they do the whole friends on opposite sides thing, it's kind of done in like a touching way, but this is just nasty,
Yeah. It's nasty. That's a good way to put it. Alf definitely did him wrong, but he probably felt justified in it, and
I don't see how.
That's kind of...
he was let go, like he was saved.
Right.
And all they wanted to do was trade. Like they didn't want to kill the prisoners; they just wanted to trade. So there, the South was being completely, on the up and up, and they were the better people there. He just killed the guy's father. I guess to spite them, or I don't.
It pretty much was out of spite. Yeah.
Like, I don't.
Well, you got to realize, and especially the Civil War, everybody saw the other people as traitors.
Yeah.
So
but why kill the guy's father? Why kill the father? What did the father do? Like really? Like.
Yeah, it's an ugly thing to do for sure.
Probably more or less because it would hurt him for even.
I get that, but the fucking guy, the dad really was pretty much an innocent guy, who just got killed because he was his father.
Right. Well, on the other hand, again, in this sort of a situation, a lot of times people will see neutrality as being just as traitorous as working for the other side.
Correct.
Yeah, I've heard that too before.
Like of course, the amusing way to say it is as Zap Brannigan was known to say, "What makes a man go neutral?"
But if you're not with me, then you're against me.
But
only
the idea,
absolutes.
Yeah. Exactly. A lot of people deal in absolutes, and Alf was, he's a young man, probably just a teen himself. He probably was very like, how dare you just pretend to be neutral? Your son is fighting for the enemy.
It definitely didn't make him feel anything for the other side after that.
Yeah. So
they should have had Alf played by Alf. Oh, that'd have been sweet.
Yeah, that would have been very interesting. But Alf would have told on his father at that point, because that's Alf.
He would have killed all the cats.
Yeah, I was going to say he would have spent the whole time hunting cats. I mean,
yeah, he wouldn't have killed the father. He would be hunting cats,
Well,
there would be no stray cats in town.
And especially the black ones, because
Right.
They would have let Alf go just because Alf would have been annoying them to death with all of his bad jokes.
Hell yeah, Alf would have single-handedly stopped the war.
All right, so I do believe that the part that we're coming up to now is the part where and this was an interesting aspect of a lot of these kind of border wars and whatever that people often forget about is their seasonality. I mean, winter on the Eastern Plains is nothing to joke about. So they would take a break during the winter. So I think this was the part where we're introduced to the Evans farm, where you have Zach Grenier, who plays Mr. Evans, and he's got the wife and the daughter-in-law, Sully Shelley, who is our character played by Joel. He come to find out that their son had been fighting for the Confederacy for, I think it was 3 weeks after their marriage.
Yeah,
and he didn't last long. So
she definitely made herself very much look available to the men too.
Well, yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean,
Well, she was, in a sense. I mean, she was a young woman who had barely had time to enjoy married life.
Yep.
And, of course, the Evanses took her in, but, they probably were not too happy for the trade in some ways.
They lost a son to gain a daughter they never wanted.
Well, I don't know. Maybe they did. I don't know. But at least they didn't have to worry about her going off to fight, I guess.
Well, yeah.
But
just going off and screwing all the guys.
So we have one little contingent of our group, Jack Bull, Jake, George Clyde, and Holt, who come out to the Evans farm to bunker down for the winter. And they literally build a bunker in the side of a hill where they start getting comfortable. And Sully comes in and exposes her prejudice in a very awkward scene where George Clyde apparently had been kind of sweet on her at first, but quickly was offended.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, of course, he already has his Miss Juanita who lives in the farm over, but
Yeah, he pretty much frigs off there the whole time, giving her that
does,
recipe.
But, you can have another one on the side too,
Well, yeah, but he may have been thinking about that too until she offended him.
until she opened her mouth.
But then they
Good freaks, just she opened her mouth.
She invites them all over, but he's like, "No, I'm going to go see Miss Juanita." So he and Holt disappear for the evening. But Jack Bull starts his wooing of the young widow, and Jake starts his period of jealousy, where his bro is,
well, spend time with the girl instead of him.
Yeah, his bro's more interested in the hoe, that. as it were.
Well, yeah,
You
I
wanna
guess
see
in
Tim?
his mind,
Life
it was
is
bros
short in the
before
war, you know.
hoes.
What's
We
that?
got so much time.
Yeah.
I guess in his mind, it was bros before hoes.
Well, that's what he was thinking, definitely. I think Jack
That's not what his bro was thinking, though.
What did he expect him to do? Sit around and whittle with him all winter or something?
Yeah.
Well, before long, he does get a whittling partner because it turns out that George Clyde wants Juanita to himself, and he sends Holt back to winter with the rest of them.
So now he's got a whittler.
So you got this whole thing where Jack Bull and Sue Lee are becoming closer and closer, and kind of sickeningly sweet, almost from the get-go. They I can understand why Jake and Holt are feeling a little or at least Jake is definitely like, I'm feeling like, like the third wheel. But there's that great moment where he tries to bring Holt into it, and Holt's like, no, I ain't here, no. It's like he knows not to stick his nose in sometimes.
Yeah. And then, of course, the next time she's like, okay, she's coming back. Can you guys skedaddle for an hour or so? Go do something?
Yeah, he's like, why don't you go play some mumbledy peg or fling walnuts at squirrels or something?
Tiddlywinks.
Hell yeah.
And he's like, I think we can find something better to do with our time. But then, when Sue Lee gives them some bread and trying to gently shoo them off, he's like, I think we're going to go
play
fling
some
walnuts at mumbledy peg flares. But unfortunately, Jack Bull and Sue Lee's tryst is interrupted by a disturbance at the Evans farm.
Not completely interrupted, because he did finish.
It was interrupted, but but after a critical juncture.
Yes, he was done. She might not have been, but he was done. So.
they were probably working on another round or something. I don't know, but
maybe so. But we found out that he did shoot her. So
he got the jackpot, as it were. Yeah. But anyway, so they get to the farm though just in time to see Mr. Evans already dead, and of course George Clyde shows up even later than they do, and they go running after the guys, and we have another little ambush scene. This one's not quite as cinematically fun because it's a little darker, and it's but they are surrounded in the woods. They take a few of them down, but Jack Bull takes a nasty hit in the shoulder, and so they have to hightail it out of there.
Bones sticking out and everything, man. That was...
Yeah,
that was kind of cool.
And George Clyde's like, dude, he's like, you need to take that arm off, and Jake can't bring himself to do it. And they straight said in the commentary, and I agree. Jake may have that decision may have cost Jack Bull his life. He might have survived if they had taken his arm off right away, but they didn't, and they waited till gangrene started, and well, that wasn't a good idea.
The girl's like, "Oh, I'll take care of him. I'll make sure." Yeah. Make sure the gangrene don't start, or it's all over.
Right.
And, she.
Well, I think they called it. Well, they call it green rot, right?
I think so, something like that. Yeah. We knew what it was.
Yeah.
But,
exactly.
She said she'll take care of him, but she really didn't. So.
Yeah. Well,
it's her fault. It's Julie's fault. He died.
She gave him moral support. But
you can do it. You can make it.
And I'll admit, if I was dying and I looked up and I saw that, it would make it less horrible. I will admit
Let's finish what we were doing earlier. So if I die, at least I can die with a smile on my face.
Right. So basically, they screw up and Jack Bull is gone. Oh, by the way, folks, we didn't say spoilers.
Yeah, I like how they just bury him right there in their little fort.
Right.
Like just right in the floor. I guess that part was convenient.
They didn't really have a lot of time to bury because his enemies all around. So
we did have we missed the part where actually George Clyde hightails it out of there and goes straight to the camp. He said he was going to go get a doctor, and Jake said the same thing to Holt, and Holt's like, as well as I did that he lit out of here and went straight to Camp Perdiz, so like George Clyde basically abandoned them. And so they bury Jack Bull in a manner of speaking, and then they take Sully and the other Evans women and the Willards, I think, were the other farm, and they were moved south, I guess, to the Missouri-Arkansas border. I guess that was the impression I got. Basically, that they were to the south. So they take her, drop her off. You get to meet Tom Wilkinson, who plays the patriarch of this farm. He's Orton Brown. His wife's played by Margot Martindale. So that's kind of a fun little couple of cast members there. Wilkinson actually is the first person, other than the people in Lee's Father Knows Best trilogy that were his first three features. Wilkinson was the first person he worked with. Well, Wilkinson and Mcguire were the first two he worked with twice. Wilkinson was in Sense and Sensibility. Mcguire was in Ice Storm. He doesn't work a lot with people more than once, even though he apparently likes most of the people he works with. He just, I guess, likes working with new people. Which, you can't fault someone for that.
Well, maybe they don't like working with him again.
No, from what I understand, most of them, I've heard most people seem to speak highly of the experience. So I don't know.
Hey, Mark Ruffalo was adjacent because Ang Lee did a Hulk movie and Mark Ruffalo was a Hulk.
Right, or would become one eventually.
Yeah.
So we have they go back to the camp and they find out that in the meantime, all their friends, colleagues, whatever you want to call them, the bushwhackers, have started congregating under the auspices of one Quantrell, who's played by John Ailes and is based on a very notable historical figure. Quantrell is a Kentuckian who actually did lead the raid into Kansas that they show in the next upcoming scenes in this film. Mm-hmm. Which, again, the Lawrence Massacre is considered one of the... for those who know of it, because most people don't.
I don't.
It's probably one of the worst blights on American history. Besides
the Battle of Shiloh, yes.
Well, Shiloh was the bloodiest day in American history, or at least that's what it's known as. That was more just general fighting between soldiers. This was a massacre. They rode into town and killed every man or male child they could find.
Which is basically the title of the film, basically.
Yeah. In a sense, yeah. Quantrell could be seen as the devil in a way. And I think there was they actually took the title from something else. I can't remember what it was, but I think it was a book about Quantrell that the title was actually taken from. So yeah, that the original book that this is based on is actually a book by Daniel Woodrell called Woe to Live On. So they figured Ride with the Devil sounded more cinematic, I guess. And I'll admit it is a great title. I love the title.
It's a good title. I mean, it makes you think it's a good movie.
I think "Woe to Live On" would catch my attention, but it would sound a lot more artsy.
It would not catch my attention.
So
I guess they should have named it that. It would have run away.
Well, it would have probably been more truth in advertising, I suppose.
Right. That was something cool. Like I said, I kept having running with the devil Van Halen running through my head while I was watching the movie, which I enjoyed much more than the movie. So at least there was something to enjoy.
So the Lawrence sequence does show some interesting things. It does show, for one, we know very well by the time that they're in town that Dutchie and Holt are now seen as the outsiders. They are seen as a pair, basically. And Black John straight up comes up and asks Dutchie if he's on their side anymore. Like he just is. There is definitely some mistrust going around. They go into town expecting to be facing soldiers, and they're facing pimple-faced trainees, townspeople. Yes, there were some trainees there, but hardly any soldiers. And so everyone kind of goes around doing their thing. George Clyde basically just rides into town, meets this guy. I think he was Dutch, like proper Dutch, not Dutchy, like, not German Dutch. That was the impression I got. And the guy kind of amused me, but he glomps onto George Clyde and just kind of follows him around. Clyde goes around shopping, basically. You got Mackeson and Turner and all of them going around just murdering, killing, pillaging, doing whatever.
I kind of feel like if there were any prisoners left in that Kansas town, it's like they rode into town and like everybody was like off fighting the war, So pretty it's much. Like they left this town open to attack.
Well, they ended up meeting a lot of those soldiers on the way back to Missouri. But for all intents and purposes, they didn't expect an attack there. And
they didn't expect some dickheads to come in and just kill all the kids and
and then you have a really interesting scene where you have Jake and Holt walk into they've been kind of watching everything with a jaundiced eye, going, "What? This is not what we signed up for." And there's a couple old men who are kind of feeling the same way, and the four of them end up just walking into I guess, for lack of a better word, a bed and breakfast, but like one of the inns in town, and they're like, "Oh, were you fixing some food?" And it's like, "Yeah, we'll serve us some." And Jake is being a right prick to the old man and his grandson, but he's being polite as can be to the woman, and the others are just kind of there, just doing their own thing. And of course, Maxon comes in and is like, "Oh, you two get out in the street." And this is one of the parts where, again, Toby had a few moments where he really stood up. And even though he was being a prick in that scene, he when it came to Mackeson, he was like, "No, we're going to finish our meal. You're just going to have to wait," basically. And Mackeson just levels him with his eye, just like stares at him, and he's like, "Yeah, it ain't worth it. Let's go."
And then the old man thanks him, and he was just like, "Shut up,"
Yeah, basically.
I'm trying to eat, guy was just trying to show gratitude,
Yeah, but he did essentially save those two, and actually, I'm sorry, I got it mixed up. I think that was what caused Black John to ride up to him and tell him, "Look, shouldn't have spared," And Clyde's like, "Oh, and then Clyde has his own dickish move. Like he had that one dude following him around, fawning all over him, and and then as he's getting ready to leave, he just pulls his gun and shoots him dead right then and there. And it's like, really? Yeah, maybe you weren't such a decent fella.
Yeah, that was pretty rough.
Yeah.
It was definitely an interesting character seeing the Mentalist and the Guardian take up that role.
Yeah, I have not watched much of The Mentalist, but I did see mention that he was. But I know enough of the show.
Is great.
Yeah, I know enough of the show to know what you mean. It's a departure. But yeah, so they get back and really, Jake and Holt are increasingly figuring out that there's really not much left for them with this group. There's been a parting of the ways. There's an interesting scene where Holt is serving people drinks, and he has this very tense moment with George Cloud. And it's sort of like an acknowledgement that when Cloud abandoned them, he basically was setting Holt loose into the world. And then not long after that, they get caught in a battle, and Cloud gets killed. And Holt is, at first, fairly distraught about it. Yeah. But then later, you have this great talk with Jake where he's like, Jake's like, yeah, you felt kind of empty inside, right? And Holt's like, no, I felt free. You know, it's like that right. Changed his world completely when, not that he didn't dislike Claude. He didn't, but as long as Claude was alive, he would always be George Claude's,
dutiful servant.
Yes, there. And so that was I thought that was a really interesting element there, how they did that. But basically, that was the thing that freed them. Basically, with Jack Bull dead and George Cloud dead, they were now outsiders fighting a cause that wasn't theirs, and they left for the Evans farm. That's kind of. And they get there and find out that, while they were gone, a little development.
Somebody had a little bundle of joy.
Yeah. And of course, everyone thinks it's Jake's because,
And of course, Jewel, the perfect person that she is, didn't let on that it wasn't him either.
Well, also part of that was societal pressure because it doesn't really matter whose baby it was. She wasn't married anymore. And so it wasn't her husband's baby. So they needed to make it bona fide.
So they like telling Jake that he needs to marry her, and he's like, whoa.
Yeah.
I don't want to buy the cow. I didn't even get any milk.
Right. Yeah. But
I love that scene where he says, you don't want to marry, they're like bickering about not wanting to marry, and then he goes, and then he says, "Oh, it's bad luck to be with you."
Yeah. He's like, it's what does he say? It's something like it's a proven fact that it's bad luck to be your man, or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah. He's like taken back and thinks about it for a second, and he's like, she's like, I guess you're right. Because she gets married.
It's kind of hard for her to argue that, honestly.
It really is. You kind of feel bad for her, but it's true.
And it's so they have that nice little, that little nice back and forth and whatever. And meanwhile, yes, as you mentioned earlier, Kroll, he discovers a use for his nubbin finger, the little baby using it as a pacifier. And then, of course, he discovers a couple of other things, too. And this is where I want to get to this one scene. This is actually the second scene where you see Sully nursing the youngin'. And I'm just going to backtrack real quick. Or another film that came out in 1999 that I vaguely considered throwing forth this month, and we will discuss it one day. Oh, yes, we will. Is the Spike Jonze film Being John Malkovich.
That's a good movie.
It's a great film. And there was when we saw it in theaters, And my friend Dave was with us, and there's a scene where Cameron Diaz has been inside Malkovich's mind, controlling him. And she did this to make love to Catherine Keener's character. And Malkovich is flipping out. He thinks he's hallucinating or being possessed or something. And he's talking to his best bud, Charlie, who, of course, is Charlie Sheen. And they, Charlie just, you were high, man. No, you were, well, I smoked, but no, you were high, But then Malkovich talks about that point that he felt like this woman was being channeled through him. And Charlie says, even better, hot lesbian witches. And when he said that, my bud threw up his arms in a victory sign. And I swear he said right there in the theater, yes! I can't remember for sure if he said it or if I just could hear it in my mind, but
I was just saying that.
I had that moment in this movie, and that was the part when Jules is sitting there, partially undone, and got the baby there, and Toby's just sitting there with this doofy look on his face, just entranced, and she's like, "Are you always gonna stay like that?" And he's like, he's just kind of starts and he's like, as long as I can. And I was like, yes. I was like, Toby, you're my man.
The next funny scene though is the next part where he's about to go to bed, like in the other room.
Yes.
And you're married to her now. You lay in her bed, and he's just looking like, what? Like he's a virgin or something, Like he's like, what? I got to sleep with her now?
So, well, just to back up then. Okay, so they are convalescing. During that attack, they were both injured. Actually, Holt had been shot in the side, and Mackeson actually shot Dutchy in the leg. Like, he kept aiming at him during the battle, and he actually hit him in the leg. So they are staying at the Evanses under the very distinct agreement that they are going to leave when they are healthy and that they are going to take Sue Lee with them. Not that they've really agreed to that part, but it's understood.
Right.
And so one day, Wilkinson's character, I said the Evans farm, the other farm,
the
whatever.
Wilson farm, whatever.
Yeah. But Tom Wilkinson, he comes in and he's like, "You feeling better?" Yeah, I'm feeling good. Yeah, a little good. And so he's like, "All right, okay. Well, I'll be back before dark." And I'm taking Holt with me. He takes, the Brown farm. There we go. So they go and they come back with this rather jovial-looking gentleman who wearing priest's vestments. and then they come to find out that they're getting married right then and there, whether they want to or not.
Toby didn't even do anything.
And then they have the wedding. Well, pretty much. And you got the. This is like, as I said in The Princess Bride, the short version.
Right.
It's like the guy marries him that makes a beat. I smell
Skip to the end. Skip to the end.
Wasn't that Spaceballs?
Yeah.
Was it? Oh,
Yeah.
Right. Sorry. Well, yeah, Spaceballs was that. Yeah, Princess Bride had a different variation on the theme. But anyway, you get the point. He's
Very
like,
close.
He's like, did I smell chicken or something like that? And someone comments about the brevity of it, and Toby's like, I do believe that man would marry stones if there was a chicken at the end of it. So they do. But yeah, Carl, I agree with you. That scene later was just great. It's like, it's like Holt and Jake at this point. They're pretty good friends actually by this point.
Yep.
And they're getting along. They're going along. They're setting down the bedrolls. The preacher's already conked out on the floor. And Jake sits down, starts taking off his boots, and Holt just looks at him. Just gives him this look.
Yeah, you know
And
you're
Jake's
married
like, what?
now.
He's like, you're supposed to sleep with the wife. He's like, great day in the morning. I gotta explain this to you.
You gotta take her bed, is what he said. You gotta take her bed.
It's your wedding night. You gotta.
And it's like, yeah. And then, of course, he goes in and he kind of gently puts his boots down and he starts getting undressed and then he sits down. And then Joel's like, no, man of mine's going to wear dirty duds to So it's like, at this point, it's clear she is ready to get started on
consummating the marriage.
On consummating that marriage. And he is... this is the part where I was like, I'm kind of Toby. I may have to rescind my vote of confidence in you, but eventually he gets it back. And then so then they head out. They go west. They get a covered wagon, and the three of them are heading west. The new baby and. They kind of get through the checkpoints, and he had been warned that Mackinson was coming gunning for him. So then you have this interesting scene where Mackinson and Turner come across them in the woods. And it's a very tense scene.
Well,
very intriguing.
It definitely is. And one of the things you have to know about having gone through a war, it changes people.
Yeah.
So I love this moment for the specific fact that both those two that came in, it's like you were seeing a ghost of themselves, because they just weren't like checking in upstairs. Their eyes were glassy, and it's like whatever was human that was ever possible inside of them is no longer there.
Because basically by this point, the war is very much turned in the favor of the Union. Quantrell and his boys got busted and sent to the all different places, and apparently these two have been running in a gang for a while. And actually, interesting bit of trivia. I think it's Frank James, Jesse's brother, and a couple other members of the Jesse James gang actually rode with Quantrell before forming that gang. So there was a lot of tie-ins to that sort of lawlessness and what have you.
Really? I didn't know that.
From this group, yeah. I've heard different reports on whether Jesse himself was part of the group, but I think for the most part, I don't think he actually was. It was more like he, like I said, some of his brother and some of their friends. But at any rate, they have this very tense discussion where Jake offers to give basically coffee, chicory, but it's poor man's coffee, to Mackinson, and he accepts. And they have this very interesting discussion where Mackinson's telling him they're going to go visit this. I don't remember the city they're going to, but I think it's the one that the other guys, basically Holt and Sue Lee, smuggled Jake through this town, through the checkpoint, because he was a known wanted criminal. And they got through it, but now Mackinson and Turner are saying, we're going there. And they're like, you're going to die. That's suicide. Don't go there. And he's like, that's where I was born. I'm going there if I want to. I'm going to go there. I'm going to have a drink. And he's like, you're going to die. And so they part. You realize that, they've had their run and they're done. They're ready to go.
And he slowly picks up his gun and puts him in his crosshairs. And he looks at him and he's like, "Hey, Dutch, are you going to shoot me?"
Yeah.
And he just kind of just stares him down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's like I said, I think those two at that point, they were just like we've done what we can, and the law's after us. There's not really any real reason to keep on doing what we were doing. The kind of the wind's out of their sails at that point. And yeah, when Dutchie and Holt as well pull guns on them. And also, he introduces, he's like, who's the woman and child? And he's like, and Jake's like, they're mine. And he actually gets this kind of like a little grin, like, well, good for you, kind of like, so it's really interesting that the movie sets you up for this big showdown between these two.
That never happened, really.
And it doesn't really happen. And apparently that was a controversial way to do it. It's one of the reasons the studio dropped the movie like a stone. But it's a shame because I think a lot of people, from what I understand, most people that saw the film kind of liked that approach because it was so different.
I actually liked it myself. I mean, like I said, the way I felt is Toby Mcguire would have shot him if he tried anything. Mm-hmm. And, the other guy just kind of thought better of it that, I'm going to get killed if I do this, so fuck it, I'm just going to leave,
Right.
So he finally smartened up, even though he was that cocky son of a bitch that, he can do whatever he wants. He finally realized that, this time he'll get his ass shot if he tries anything, so...
Well,
he finally learned his lesson a little bit.
He's the one who killed Clyde during that whole war bit. So,
I mean, I liked the ending. I thought that it was. He was tired, and he wouldn't have wanted to necessarily go out that way, because at that point that was all that's left. So he was the one to go out fighting. And this wasn't the fight he wanted. So,
yeah, he wanted it with the North at least.
So Evil Jay and Silent Bob decided to go on go out.
He does look a bit like Jay. I mean, especially in this movie.
He's nowhere near as funny though.
No, but it's interesting to think about that. I don't even think I'd put that in my mind, but
I know.
But Turner doesn't look a whole lot like Bob, but
but he was pretty silent.
I forgot that for a moment that dude had actually gotten shot like from through his cheeks, so that's why he wasn't able to speak.
No, it wasn't shot. He got kicked by a horse.
No, I thought he was shot in his cheeks with a bullet that just went and like straight through, and it wasn't that he was kicked. It was a bullet that went straight through. So,
well, it happened with a horse on top of him either way. So that wasn't and actually, incidentally, that particular moment, the stunt person actually did hurt themselves. And Ang Lee was like, do you want that shot in there? And apparently the stunt person told him, you damn well better use that shot.
Yeah.
I got really hurt, so you better use that shit.
Right. But, in so many words. Anyway, there actually was one more. That wasn't actually our final scene. We get one last scene where Holt is leaving because he wants to find his mother. He thinks she's in Texas. He's not sure. His mother and sister had been sold off because George Clyde could only buy his freedom. So he wants to find them and set them free. And he's going to start by going to Texas to look for his mother. So they have a parting of the ways somewhere in like western Kansas or whatever, like right on the edge of the Rockies pretty much. And so there's a lot of circularity here, a lot of touches to earlier parts in the film. Holt touching his hat to Sully as she's sleeping in the thing, and the wagon. And then he rides off into the sunset, and it's kind of interesting because they point out in the commentary that they think that maybe like the first Western you can think of where the black person's riding off to the sunset at the end since Blazing Saddles, which I'm not sure if it's the first, but it's something you don't see very often. So it's a nice change of pace there. But it really does kind of, in that last 2 or 3 scenes, it really does kind of morph from a sort of Midwestern war film almost into a full-on Western for that last scene.
Right.
And so it is kind of cool how they did that. And really, in a lot of ways, it's a film that I like that it's kind of nebulous and kind of changes as it goes. And I think it does have sort of, like they said, Seamus and Lee said that they wanted to do it partly because they thought the novel had a strongly cinematic quality to it. I need to read the novel. I've never read it. But I'm thinking the film has kind of a novel quality to it in its structure.
Yeah,
I mean that in a good way. I mean that in a good way. That's not always a good thing, but I think in this case, in a good way, yes. But that pretty much does get us through the plot.
I read a lot faster than that movie was.
I don't know how long the novel is either. You know, it could be that it's like some super long one, but I kind of
It's like War and Peace.
I don't think it's that long. But so anyway, like I said, that's pretty much the plot. Did y'all want to have any other thoughts on plot, on characters, or anything before we move into production?
Only the fact that it's a period piece, and you gotta understand that. I mean, there is a lot of language of the time that is not exactly acceptable in this day and age, and I get that.
Or any day and age.
But this is the language that was spoken at that point in time, and you got to treat it as such. So, no matter what your opinions, as negative as they can be, about some of the things that come out of the racial aspects of this film,
it was accurate, is what you're saying.
It was accurate, yes.
It was accurate. I agree with that. I just don't like it, but it was accurate. So I mean, the movie did do its job of showing you how the Civil War was and how it was, I guess, in Missouri's, in that instance, and how, and they dealt with the Civil War and stuff. So
honestly, this was only a snippet of what was actually going on in the broader battles. So you were seeing this on like the edge of everything that was going on, So it's an interesting aspect that you don't get to see a whole lot. So
I think we may have mentioned this on, I'm trying to think when we did. I know we mentioned it in one discussion or another. I want to say maybe Last Samurai, but anyway, one thing that I find fascinating is war films that are fairly focused, that you are watching a small group of people or just a couple of people. And, a lot of war films try to be these big epic things, and you can kind of lose track because there's so much going on. There's so many people, there's so many, and this one had a little bit of that. But when it really, at the end of the day, it was pretty well focused on a group of less than 10 individuals. And so that, I think, really helped with giving it a sense of, giving you something to follow.
Yeah, it's almost got that Band of Brothers type feel to it with the way it does that. There's a lot of characters, but they're like, we're mostly focused on this one group with the larger war as a whole, kind of this general backdrop that's going on outside of our story, And I think that, you're onto something there. It can get overwhelming trying to follow those big epics. I prefer like smaller squad-based stuff like this, so you can kind of get into the headspace easier of the characters, I guess.
It was funny when Dave, you said something about you should know your own country's history or something. I personally hate American history. I think it's boring. It's fucking. That's why I don't like Civil War movies or anything really with U.S. history. I just think it's boring. Give me British history or anything else, or most anywhere else history, and I love it. It's just fun. I like watching those movies. They're enjoyable to me. But yeah, American history is just kind of boring to me.
Yeah, it can be, and certainly I didn't see. I've always had a weird thing with history. I've never really liked it as a class, I guess you could say. Although Civil War was a little different. That was kind of fun, but when I get into studying it, and you guys have probably picked up on this by now. This is certainly a theme that I have hit a few times this month, and again. Next week's films are going to be a little more fanciful, although Hail Caesar dives headlong into 50s cinema and 50s Hollywood. This one, but each one of them dives headlong into a particular time and place, and they're full of details that people would not necessarily know, just as a matter of course. Right. And I love films like that I feel like I'm learning something. And that was one of the reasons I really liked this one when I first saw it was mostly new to me. I didn't know most of this stuff. And again, the characters, except for Quantrell, are mostly fictional. Most of the actual events we see are fictional, but they could have happened. You know what I mean? They're a really good stand-in. And actually, I can't remember who it was. I think it was Jeffrey Wright, actually. There's a really good interview with him on the Criterion edition, and it's worth watching. But I think he was the one that was talking about he saw a reunion picture that some of these bushwhackers took like 10, 12 years later. And there were like 4 black people in the picture. And he's like, he was kind of amazed by that, but it was kind of, it is something that people just don't eat it, especially the reductionist view that Civil War was over slavery. That was a big part of it. But there was also the issue of states' rights. There was also the issue of competing economies. There was the issue of people being douchebags and thinking that I'm right and you're wrong. And there was just all that kind of stuff going on. And then there were profiteers who just, a lot of the people in this movie are profiteers who just are taking advantage of a bad situation. And so I really think that the movie captured that really well. And so I was intrigued by that. But and that's a good segue into production, because this is a film. Ang Lee is known for being a bit of a perfectionist. He really goes for detail. He really goes for, and it's one of the reasons why I'm always so quick. So many people want to rag on Crouching Tiger because it's, quote, not realistic. I'm like,
I love Crouching Tiger.
I love it too. I look at it as the second best fairy tale, or second or third best fairy tale out there.
But I love that one just as much as I hate Hulk. So
Princess Bride is the best fairy tale.
I am the opposite. Then, I love the Hulk and didn't like Crouching Tiger.
Both of them were films that took what people probably expected and went in the direction they didn't expect. And I still remember Roger Ebert saying that Hulk was a comic book movie for people who wouldn't be caught dead at a comic book movie. And I think that's not an inaccurate way of putting it.
Yeah, that's pretty spot on.
Yeah. I mean, it had a great story. It just, the action was lacking. And in a Hulk movie, that's kind of fucked up.
Well, people want to see Hulk smash. Yes, I agree.
But likewise, in the second Hulk movie, it was a lot of Hulk smash, but the story sucked. There was no story at all. So, I mean, although I do want to see Hulk smash, I do want a story. So, you put the two together, you get one hell of a good Hulk movie. But separately, they weren't that great separately.
Yeah.
I do think that I really liked Bruce Banner as David Banner better than I did than Edward Norton, and I wasn't all that broken up with Edward Norton when return to the role, and they gave it to Mark Ruffalo because I think he did a way better job.
After we know about his
That
war
I agree.
crimes now, though, I don't know how I feel about Mark these days.
I personally think Norton was better than Bana in the role. I do think Ruffalo's the best of the three.
It's Ruffalo.
I mean, I like Norton, I really do,
yeah.
but I just didn't think it was his role. I like
Yeah.
David Bana better, but
And
Right.
anytime you cast Norton or anything, he's going to step in and try to take it over.
Yeah, he has that reputation, which was one of the reasons I loved Birdman, and one of the reasons I loved him in Birdman was he was playing that role. And I love it when people are self-aware enough to lean into their reputations, which again was why I like Charlie Sheen and Beach. But
Charlie Sheen.
yeah.
Great.
But at any rate, this
Charlie
film
Sheen was paid to play Charlie Sheen in
basically, yeah. Basically, well, yeah, but that one got a little out of, that got a little out of control.
Cocaine
A little
What
bit.
happened?
Cocaine and tiger blood will do that.
Right. So at any rate, so overall with the production, the look and feel of the film, we've touched on this a little bit, but what's everyone's overall feel on
Oh, they
that?
nail it.
Definitely, they nailed that. You know, I mean, I didn't particularly like the film for different reasons, but they definitely nailed that. You know, and you know, again, I don't like the Civil War time period and stuff, but they definitely nailed it. It really felt like it was
authentic. Yeah,
it definitely felt
Right.
completely authentic. I mean, I'm not an expert, so it might not have been, but it felt like it was. So you know, that's what I'm.
me
gonna
either. But you can kind of tell when like they do these
Mhm.
movies sometimes, and it's just dudes in like cosplay outfits out in the woods or something. You know.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
This didn't feel like that. It felt
Well-
like lived in. You know.
It felt legit.
Speaking of dudes in cosplay outfits, though, they did get some Civil War reenactors to help with the large crowd scenes, like the
Oh, I
parts
bet.
where
That's cool.
the parts where they were doing the raid on Lawrence and everything. A lot of those soldiers were played by reenactors. So these were people who knew the land and knew a little bit about how the battles were supposed to be done, and
Because they always do it.
so that was kind of fun. And as far as someone had mentioned the music, the score is by Michael Dana, who does phenomenal work. Almost everything he does is great. And he does a lot with Ang Lee. I know he did the score for Life of Pi. I think he did some others. But Lee talks about this film is the only one he made, according to him, that he felt a little unsatisfied with. And the studio forced cuts on the film. So Dana's score is for the theatrical cut. So when they recut it for Criterion, Lee was a little bit displeased with the way the music fell because he wasn't able to make it perfectly fit. Which I think you barely notice. I barely notice. But it is unfortunate that they don't have that feel that it's like a perfect finished film. You know what I mean? Like, but I mean, what do y'all think? Did y'all ever get the impression that the music seemed off or what have you?
No.
Yeah, it
I
wasn't
didn't watch it on the
noticeable. I
Criterion
don't
version,
feel like.
so
What's that?
I didn't watch it on the Criterion itself, so I couldn't tell you that.
Oh, okay. So there were a handful of scenes that were different. Not a whole lot, but a couple of them. But
I
Enough
watched
that if
it
it
with
was your
whatever you
movie
sent
and
me.
you were cutting it, you'd be like
Brian.
annoyed, you know. I could feel his frustration on something like that.
right. And of course they end with a minor hit by Joel. What's Simple? Actually, it was a pretty big hit at the time. What's Simple is True, from her Spirit album, which I think they missed a glorious opportunity to get an original song for the film. But yeah, whatever. But there's something like I have a version of this film. I snapped it up the first time I found it. And actually, I meant to say that. I think I rented the film, and that was how I first saw it. But when I found it for the first time for sale in the wild, I remember very distinctly. I found it at Tower Records in Richmond. may they rest in peace.
Mhm.
And even though it was a little more than I wanted to spend, I snapped it up. I was like, I want this movie. And that edition I upgraded, quote unquote, for Criterion. And Criterion has they've got a really good critical essay as usual, a couple of historical things on Quantrell in the booklet. There's 2 commentary tracks, and there's a great interview with Jeffrey Wright. And that's it. But my original one had the music video for What's Simple is True. I'm like, damn it, like you couldn't spring for a little extra to get the rights to that song? I mean, I understand rights for music are, but still, that would have been a great bonus feature. I could have sold my copy instead of keeping 2.
Right.
But anyway, I guess because they also didn't put the theatrical cut, I think with Criterion, they should put multiple cuts on there when they have the option. That would be a nice way of doing it. But anyway, just a thought. But
I thought
So,
the movie was
a question for
go ahead.
someone who doesn't really know what is Criterion?
it's a collection of films for art lovers and film lovers, and they try to keep in print important films. So a lot of times your commercial hits will not be in the collection, but sometimes they are.
Right, because they're
Think-
already going to be saved because
Think-
they're hits.
Right.
Think first that anything artsy will get into a Criterion collection, but they've broadened their horizons over
Or
the last
on Mars.
And yet-
years.
And yet with Ang Lee, I believe they only have two so far. They have this one and they have the Ice Storm, which is the one that came before this.
Not the Hulk. I'm insulted.
They well, it's going to be hard for them to put Hulk on
Well,
Criterion,
and-
especially with Disney owning Marvel.
Criterion
All the
does go
original
back
ones,
back to the Laserdisc days too. So,
Yeah.
I mean, Ghostbusters was on the Criterion collection in Laserdisc.
But a lot of their Laserdisc ones are way out of print. They no longer have the rights for them, and that's unfortunate. But the one that baffles me is that Lee's first 3 films, the so-called Father Knows Best trilogy, would be perfect for the collection, but they've never released those. And I'm like, what are they waiting for? But at any rate, he says this one is sort of in a trilogy with Sense and Sensibility and Ice Storm. They kind of form a very loose trilogy. But I'm really not. More like this one and Ice Storm are more of a duology because they're different aspects of Americana. But anyway, it is also worth noting this film was filmed on a fairly low budget, so they did a really good job of doing a lot with not a lot. So I think it was something like 8 or 9 million, or maybe a little more, which for a film of this scope is considered low budget.
I'm seeing 38 million.
Oh, is it that much? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know why I was thinking 8, but still, like I say, you compare it to, let's say, Saving Private Ryan came out the year before this. I'm willing to wager that one had 4 times the
Oh
budget.
God, yeah.
But the
It ain't like that one either.
oh geez. So anyway, I think we've probably gotten to the point where it's time to do our favorites and such. What do y'all? Why don't we start with you, Brandon?
I guess I like that scene at the end where the two are kind of confronting each other, and where you think something's going to happen, but then it changes the expectation, and they go their separate ways on their different paths, and I did like that.
Right. Cool. How about you, Dave?
I'm definitely gonna have to go with this one, where Toby Mcguire's finger got shot off, and he was like, "My pinky! They shot my pinky!" And I'll have to also go with the moment where he was staring at her breast, and it was like, I'm gonna keep staring at it as long as I like.
Right.
Other than
Okay.
that, I guess gonna also say the fact when his friend got shot, and when he finally did make the decision, he was actually able to try like cut his arm off, but because of how gruesome it seemed to be. The act of doing so, I guess I liked that a little bit too.
Okay. How about you, Mo?
Oh boy, I mean, all of these that have been mentioned are great. I don't know if I have like a singular favorite scene. I mean, it's like little things throughout it, you know. But I guess if I had to narrow it down to just one, probably that whole scene in the bed and breakfast or whatever, where Toby Mcguire like stands up to that dude so he can eat his eggs or whatever. That's probably my favorite, and I just in general really liked the way the movie was shot, especially during like any of the action scenes or the movement scenes where they're like on horses or running away. Like whoever was doing the cinematography really was nailing that feeling of like, I don't know, man. It's just like when they were running away into the woods, that part was almost kind of creepy to me, just the way that it was shot, and it felt like you were like right there with them. And the horses felt fast as hell, which was fun. They don't really nail that in a lot of movies, you know. You got to shoot people on horses, right? Or it just comes off as kind of boring, like a dude trotting along on a horse. But if you do it right, you feel like you're going just super fast, and I dug it. They did a good job of that.
Okay, so our cinematographer is Frederick Elms. Unfortunately, we didn't mention him before, but this is okay. He has some fun credits. He did Jim Jarmusch's The Dead Don't Die. He did do Hulk. So he did another one with Ang Lee. And he also did, he was the director of photography on David Lynch's Blue Velvets and Wild at Heart, for that matter. So,
shit, dude, yeah, he did.
He
He
got
shared
some-
cinematography duties on Eraserhead.
he's got some
as
good
well.
stuff. Yeah. So good times there. And it's worth noting the film is edited by Tim Squires, who was our editor on Gosford Park. So we've got a return there. So anyway, how about you, Forrest? What about your favorites?
I agree with Toby Mcguire getting his pinky shot off, and also Julie, their characters are racist. But I mean, if I was Toby Mcguire,
Yeah.
I mean, you're not gonna not look at Jules' boobs. That's just
right.
I mean, I don't like the fact that she was a racist, but I'd probably say her.
Those boobs ain't racist, bro.
Yeah,
right.
Right. So what about you, Carl? What are your favorite?
Well, the pinky scene, because like I said,
Okay.
you know, and like I said, I just laughed and kind of said that's what you deserve. But it was pretty funny the way he was like, "My pinky, they show pinky."
Right.
And then I do have to mention again the scene with Holt, and Holt having to basically tell him to go lay with his wife and not him. You know,
Yeah.
it's hilarious that he was so green about it that he didn't even realize that, you know, he's married, that he gets to go sleep with the wife. You know?
Yeah.
So he gets the benefits of it.
Yeah.
Even though he never agreed to marry her or anything, just was kind of forced into it. But you know, I guess it ain't the worst thing in the world to be forced to
make the most of the
marry
situation.
Jewel.
Yeah. And I'm gonna. I mean, again, I've already said my favorite part. There was that one part, that one line. You know, as long as I can. I thought that was freaking hilarious, and But I agree. That scene where Holt is giving him a dressing down about not going to sleep with the wife was great. But it was great not just because it was funny, but because it really did show that they had become legit friends and that they actually, cared a bit about each other.
Yeah,
And
I mean, you see that.
yeah.
You see that a lot through the movie. I mean,
Yeah.
like when they're whittling together, that's like when you
Yeah.
first really kind of see it.
Right.
And then just a bunch of other scenes together where he
Yeah.
just kind of becomes Toby Mcguire's friend,
Right.
and not just a black man or whatever. It's just
Right.
they're actually friends and care about each other and stuff. And I did also I guess one more scene I will mention is the gun when they both have the shotguns out and they're holding it on the other guy and stuff, and that was just kind of a cool thing, like I said.
That final
Toby
confrontation.
Mcguire, he may look like a kid, but at that scene, he looked like he meant business. Like you try something, I'm going to shoot your ass. Like he really looked like he would shoot his ass if he tried anything. So that was well done. So
right. So he finally lived up to his Uncle Ben's words, right? But anyway, so there we go. So we got Ride with the Devil in the can there. I'm glad y'all joined us for this, and everyone here, I'm glad you joined us for this. And I guess we'll forego the outros for the end of the next one, right?
Definitely.
And then, shall we say goodnight, everyone?
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Everyone.